Hi everyone, and welcome to my June video. So the topic for this month is building a new paradigm around healing conflict. So I'm excited to dive into this potent and very relevant topic. Before I do, I just want to make two quick announcements. One is that on Thursday, which is June 6th, in 2 days from the time this video is coming out, we'll be having our monthly event, Planetary Upshift Meditations, and for the Gemini new moon. We will be meeting here in this office in Sedona, 6 to 7:30 for a potent evening of sacred alchemy, aligning with the heart, planting our seeds of creation for the betterment and for the creation of what we want in our lives, in our own lives and in the collective. So this is an act of love, it's an act of service, and we stream the tickets are free for online. So if you haven't ever joined us, I highly recommend it. I think it's a great opportunity to co-create and building community together through the heart. To support each other, to amplify the efforts that we each make individually towards being a conscious creator. To amplify that in the group is very powerful. It magnifies our power. So please check it out. The second announcement is that I'm going to be, regarding my Psychology of Awakening online course, I'm going to be re-recording and up-leveling and upgrading the whole course by recording all new teaching videos. So the content is all the same as it's been. If you want to check it out, I'll leave the link in the description for that course. But I will be recording and upgrading all the teaching modules with new videos. So new present-centered teachings that will be about 30 to 40 minutes each, and it's a very powerful curriculum for understanding and mapping what the process of awakening is, awakening to our spiritual nature, and the psychological process that we go through of transformation in that. So it provides a map, an understanding, how do we heal the state of separation and bondage. How do we understand, how do we heal the brain and body and nervous system? The whole thing has to be deconstructed. And over time, a whole new brain, body system, belief system, etc., right, over time is created, is established in alignment with our divine blueprint, really, with the truth of who we are. So check that out, and you can look for the new videos to be coming out in the fall if you sign up for the online course. Okay, so healing conflict is such a powerful topic because it really cuts to the core of, I think, what we are up to on this planet at this time in terms of this transformation, in terms of our own transformation of ourselves, and in terms of becoming transformative agents of change in the quantum field and in humanity, in the way that we're relating to each other. So what I'm going to talk about here is looking at first our own internal conflict. So how do we address our own internal conflicts within ourselves optimally? And I'm going to apply a method or a methodology around understanding this psychologically of how we deal with internal conflict. And then we're going to apply that same principle to external conflict with others, because it's the very same conflict. But I think if we can understand the principle and we can each relate to it within ourselves first, it becomes easier then to see how that same principle applies to conflict energy with others. And now when I'm speaking about conflict energy, this is a broad topic or phenomena. Conflict as a phenomena is extremely broad. So we understand that there are so many different ways that conflict arises, and different types of conflict, and different contexts in which conflict takes place. So this is one of these foundational ideas that has applications in so many different experiences of conflict. But what we're speaking to is conflict as a whole, and then we can see how it applies to all these different situations. Okay, so beginning with the understanding, just looking within ourselves as individuals, we recognize that we have internal conflict within ourselves that arises in so many different ways. So, for example, if we look at, the psyche as a multifaceted reality within ourselves, that we have, different parts of ourselves that are more highly developed, that are more mature, that have, highfalutin values for ourselves, that have goals, have aspirations, have knowledge, have wisdom, have life experience, etc. And then there's other parts of ourself that are less developed, less integrated. Perhaps, aspects of the wounded child, aspects of ourselves, that if there was trauma or some big life event that happened at a certain age, that part of ourself in adolescence or, early childhood still hasn't been integrated, hasn't been healed. So we end up, as we understand, just basically in, depth-oriented psychology, that the psyche has lots of different aspects, and really, as we grow up into an adult, in early adulthood, we're pretty fractured inside, generally speaking. We're pretty fragmented in the psyche because we've had to adapt to our environment as we've grown up, and our ego structure, as I've talked about in the last video, has developed different ways of functioning, different defenses, different orientations of how I deal with different situations in order to survive. And in doing that, all the things that weren't able to be dealt with, that were too overwhelming, aspects of the self that were rejected and it wasn't safe to express in our family environments, were all sequestered, exiled, right, to the unconscious. This is what Jung talks about so clearly and beautifully, this theory. And so as we become formulated into our adult psyche, we have to then turn back towards ourselves and look and, okay, like, who needs attention here? Like, what's going on? What have I left out? So we understand that, and I'm sure, those of you listening here can relate to the fact that the more conscious we become, the more self-aware, the more we become aware of inner conflict that oftentimes is ongoing within ourselves, between different aspects of ourselves, that needs to be resolved. So, for example, let's say that in my relationship with, this is just hypothetical, in my relationship with my mother, it's not safe to express, it hasn't been safe to express my joy. And like as a child, every time I expressed my joy, it would trigger my mother's, pain and the way that she's not in her joy. So she would act out at me in some way. She would cut me down, etc. So I've grown up with rejecting my joy or being joyful as a self-expression because it wasn't safe and I would get hurt when that happened. So, Pavlov's theory in this, the way our development works, as I grow up as an adult, then I become in conflict with myself because I want to express my joy, but there's a part of me that's joyful and that joy arises, but then this other part shuts it down before it has a chance to even fully be felt and expressed. Okay, so this is just one example. Again, as you know, there's so many different ways this can play out. So I'm in conflict between my joyful self that wants to express and the part of me that has learned that it's not safe. Okay? So that's just to give an example of what I'm talking about here. So let's just say this is just like a generic example for anything you can think of, even in yourself. There's two parts of you that have conflicting values, conflicting agendas, and they're in conflict because they're opposite, right? One wants to express joy, one wants to suppress joy. So when we have an inner conflict, this method that is so effective and powerful of resolving conflict goes like this. That we basically make space for both sides of the conflict. So because the conflict is so, the inner conflict experience is so disabling because it keeps us frozen, because the two sides are opposite of each other and they're both real. They're both have reality within us. Okay? So they're opposites, they're in conflict just by nature. Express joy, suppress joy. But they're both true within me. And so as long as the conflict is at play, I'm stuck. I'm stuck in the conflict, just continuously being there. And I don't have any movement. Okay? So how we resolve the internal conflict is by giving space internally for both sides, and basically doing this process of having inner dialogue. Okay, so we give full space to the one side. We really ask that part about itself, and yes, and okay, like we're holding full space for this part to have its say, to be itself, to exist in the space. And then we go and we do the same thing for the other side. Then we go to this side. Okay, let's fully listen to this side. Let's fully understand, empathize, validate, and hold complete space for this side to exist, to have its full experience, okay? So we're practicing holding a wider space for both parts. Both parts get equal validation, representation, and space to exist, okay? And so what happens in this process, beautifully, is that then we get both parts to have a exchange, to have a conversation, and to allow an energy exchange to take place between the two, where they're literally just communicating, and then oftentimes will be an integration or a unification of those two parts into one. But the alchemy of this, right, is that what happens, and this is the opposite of what we think is going to happen. We're like, well, these two parts are opposite. How will this conflict ever be resolved? Like, either one has to be true or the other has to be true. That's the only way that we resolve conflicts, is for one to sort of win out over the other, right? But nay, that's not true. So this is the beauty here, is that, and Jung talked about this as the transcendent third. This was his concept. This idea of when we hold space for both sides of a conflict, we hold this space for this transcendent third position in the field. And so the transcendent third is this principle in the process that is up here, and it's holding space for both sides. And when we hold, this is the magic and the alchemy, is when we hold space for both sides, something happens, something transformative happens to the two sides. And the conflict ends up getting resolved in some non-linear way. Okay, this is the transcendent third is really another dimension. If we could look at this dimensionally, this is just polarization. And then this third thing here introduces another dimensionality to the whole situation. So what happens, and if you think about this, of any experience you've ever had of this, is that something that's beyond what these two parts in their conflict energy can perceive, something outside of this closed system of these two in conflict, in this like small bandwidth of reality, where we're like one has to be right or the other, and they're like fighting with each other to win. Something else happens. Something more is possible here, actually, beyond the understanding of those two parts. And the way that happens is creative, is from the psyche. You know, it happens creatively. Because the reason why it happens, and this is the key, is that these two, neither one of them is being threatened. It's not being, there's no fight taking place here. Okay? The energetic formula is that both are being fully allowed to be fully themselves without being threatened that the other one is going to take over. Because each one has to go through some transformation. Each of these things has to go through a transformation of consciousness to resolve the conflict and then join at a higher level of integration. Okay? The reason why this happens is because as long as these two realities are in conflict and they're fighting for to win, they're just continuing to reaffirm the conflict energy. Okay? There's something magic that happens once each of these sides is feeling seen and heard and respected and honored. That's what happens. It's sort of it's another dimension again of it's beyond the dualistic mind's thinking that, well, these two things are opposite, so there's no way one has to be right and one has to be wrong, right? There's no way they can both be true, but miraculously something happens when they're both fully allowed to be and not being threatened by an opposing force. Okay, so this, again, is a psychological process that we do in psychology within ourselves to resolve inner conflicts. And it's pretty, I have to say, like, as a therapist in my work, it's pretty profound. I mean, I've done this so many times with clients. Working through inner conflict is a very profound and important and key part of our integration work within ourselves and healing. And these inner conflicts show up in all these so many different ways. And so taking this principle, okay, so now that I've really laid that out really clearly in terms of looking at inner conflict, let's turn and look at how this also is true in terms of dealing with external conflicts with others. And specifically understand how powerful, if we're able to apply the same template in our external conflicts that arise with others, that same inexplicable sort of magic of what happens when both people are being honored in their truths that are different from each other, something does happen that transcends the conflict and this transcendent third position. And so let's look first at what is so challenging about the way that we all struggle to deal with conflict. Okay, why is it so difficult? And what are the things that come up for each of us, when a conflict, for example, like a conflicting belief, I'm going to use again, conflict shows up in so many different ways in relationships. Conflicting desires, conflicting values, conflicting beliefs show up in all these different ways. And then there's, even on the lesser intense scale, just differences, just difference of preferences for things, right? There's everything from just subtle differences that don't necessarily, show up as conflict, to the most, threatening type of conflict that can really create discord and disconnection. Okay. So when we're in relationship with someone, and I'm talking about, closer friendships, family, partners, relationships where there's more intimacy, more connection, more investment in the relationship, persisting and going on and continuing, where there's some investment, there's some care, there's some depth. Okay. If we run into a conflict with like the grocer, or, someone in society where there's just less skin in the game, it can be a lot easier to not get involved in conflict that's really difficult. So this is really more intimate relationships. So when we're in a more intimate relationship, what we're wanting is connection, right? There's different functions of relationship. There can be functionality, there can be functional communication. There's all kinds of different ways that we're engaging and interacting with each other for different reasons, some of which are more functional. But we can say, just at the core level, what we want in relationship is connection with each other. That's the point. Whether we're even doing a project that's functional, or we're doing something together, the whole point of relating and being in relationship with each other as humans is to have there be connection. So the point of being in a relationship, and especially longer term, like investing, is that we want to have connection with the other person, right? So because we're wanting connection, we're wanting connection, but conflict arises within the field of relationship, just as a matter of fact. Like, especially at this time, the culture that we're all have been entrained into and are, trying to awaken out of, all the cultural conditioning that is not supportive to connection, right? So we struggle with conflict energy because we haven't been, really taught or trained or learned how to deal with conflict. And we're living at a time where, the conflict energy is just so off the charts. I mean, it feels like we're living in a very... there's been conflict and wars and things going on this planet for a very long time. But my point is that it feels like we're in a unique cultural era at this time, where the conflict energy is just extremely, like, when it comes to socially and like what people are believing, the conflict energy is just extremely high. So we're dealing with a lot of conflict energy, and we're not really well equipped to know how to deal with it. And that's why I'm making this video, because I'm trying to help us kind of give a template and bring some of these things to light to help illuminate what's so challenging about it, and what is a solution, what is a way of approaching it that I think can be helpful. Okay, so what happens, and again, this is like an overarching generalization, but what happens, it seems, some patterns that happen around when two people come into a conflict in a moment. And let's just use conflicting beliefs. It could be a conflicting belief about reality, like a spiritual belief, or it could be a conflicting belief about, something that's going on in the world, whatever it is, like a belief, a perception, conflict within the way that these two people are perceiving truth and reality in one way or another. Okay? So this is just, again, like this topic is just such a big deal right now for us because we're living in this era where truth, like what is true, is like has become this extremely contentious cultural conversation, mostly in the mainstream, the way things are being presented and talked about in the mainstream culture. But then because so many people are listening to those conversations, it trickles down into the way people are talking and relating to each other. So this is like why this is a powerful example, okay? So conflicting belief that arises about something that's happening in the world, or about like a spiritual core belief, existential, belief about the nature of reality and all of that, which is very, very sensitive, right? Very vulnerable for people. So what happens when a conflict arises? I'm going to just generalize. There's I'm going to say 3 different options here. Okay, so what'll happen is that one person will either attack the other person. So either one side of the equation will attack the other person, basically coming from the old paradigm. Same thing with the inner conflict, right? Where the paradigm is like, okay, well, one of us is right and one of us is wrong, and we need to battle it out, fight, go to war, right, with each other, to see whose reality is going to win and who's right and who's wrong. And that's the paradigm and that's the goal. And so one person will, attack the other person, discredit them, gaslight them, show them and give them all kinds of facts and data points and what all your sources are that back up your claims, and attack the other person. Okay, try to get the other person, discredit them, push them off their platform, show them how they're wrong. Okay, that's definitely one thing that happens a lot. The other thing that happens, and I'm gonna say that this is the other person, because usually we tend to be wired towards one or the other. I'm going to say that's a generalization, but generally we tend to be wired one way or the other in terms of our default mode for our shadow side, our default mode for the unhelpful ways that we've been trained and that we are acting out how to deal with conflict. Okay, the other side is the person who submits, basically, who shuts down, who basically goes away and avoids participating in the conflict. Okay, so basically one is aggressive and one is passive. The passive one can show up in a lot of different ways. So the passive one might shut down on one's own truth and recognize that there's a totally different reality here, but maybe they believe it's not safe. It's not safe to speak my truth with this person because they're going to attack me. But whatever it is, this person doesn't want to fight. Okay, it's more like, flee. And the way a person flees can look many different ways. But they're not showing up for the conversation. They don't want to fight. So they remove themselves, they withdraw, they shut down. They may even, if they're more sophisticated, stay in the conversation and because they're basically avoiding the conflict. So that maybe they try to stay connected by asking the person questions, by just trying to get out of the situation in one way or another, okay? But they're avoiding the conflict. They're not participating, okay? So either one of these strategies, and again, there are people who show up both ways in different situations, but either one of these strategies has the effect of, if the goal of the relationship is for connection and communication and for being together, we're having this conversation, the thing comes up. The point of it is to be in relationship, but what happens in either of those examples is there's a loss of connection, okay? So either if this person attacks the other person, then this person's trying to defend or flee as a result, then there's a loss of connection. If this person passively exits the conversation and is avoiding conflict, that's also a loss of authentic connection, right? So either way, the connection is lost, and there's either like a rupture or like a discordant, rupture in the connection, in the relationship, to whatever degree, or maybe it's just never dealt with and you continue on in the relationship and then you just try to not talk about that thing, or there's all different ways it can play out. But the point is that one way or another, the connection is lost, and most likely the conflict energy there has created disconnection, and it's also, most importantly here, reinforced the lack of ability for the people to deal with conflict effectively, right? So they've lost connection, they're disconnected now, and they're both triggered in their own stuff around the thing one way or another. They're unhappy. They're then, having to process that. Like, there's discordant energy created in the field at large. There's a loss of connection. There's a lost opportunity for communication, right? For integration as two people. For communication is a unifying word, right? Calm is to bring together, is to unify. To communicate is to actually come together. Okay, so there's a loss of meaning, there's a loss of communication. Okay, so this is basically the way that conflict is, the shadow side of conflict, and the ways that our inability and the old paradigm is preventing us from being better at this, from learning how to effectively show up for conflict and to begin to transform and uplift, up-level ourselves as humanity around dealing with differences, okay? Dealing with different opinions, different truths, differences, cultural differences, right? All the different ways that the differences show up between human beings, okay? So this is what I'm so passionate about here, and getting to the heart of this message is to, okay, so what can we do? How do we stay with, in the field of a conflict that arises, conflict energy? How do we stay in that with each other and see what else might be possible, what else might happen? And the reason why this is so important, this is literally, we have to learn this as humanity. So we've all been, we have ancestral trauma, we have all this different tribalism and, a whole slew of baggage and conditioning around, the violence and the wars and the ways that we've been hurt and traumatized and victimized. And the ways that we've harmed others and attacked and hurt other people. It's all part of this old paradigm consciousness that we're trying to work our way out of. And this is really the Achilles heel of the whole process. It comes down to how we are relating to each other. I mean, there's, it's like people even in the spiritual community or spiritual people who are, engaging in healing and spirituality and all this stuff. There's so many people even who are really have a lot of knowledge and wisdom and are teaching people, but who then are completely acting out in their relationships. They're acting out power, abuse of power, right? So this is really the mastery. This is where the rubber meets the road, is in the heart, is how can we really be with each other in these places, with our family members, with our friends, with our people we're exploring relationship with and intimacy. How can we show up in a different way? And it's critical. It's the hardest. It's really the hardest part of where the rubber meets the road in our spiritual awakening and embodiment. So here's the thing, is that with this new template then, if we apply what I talked about with the inner conflict, healing inner conflict with the transcendent third whole principle, okay? So this is the key, is that if we can apply that same principle to conflict between two people, then what we want to do is the same thing. We want to hold space for both people to have their truth completely, uninterrupted, unimpinged, free to validate, to hold space for both people's realities, which, yes, they're in conflict. They might even be opposite. Well, I think this about this, and I think the opposite about it. But that's the whole point, is that it's not about fighting and battling it out over here in this old warring mentality, which is violent. It's violent. We have to stop this. So we need to, this new paradigm is about holding this wider space around the whole thing. Okay, we're not battling over this space in the middle where we're fighting, one person's trying to get rid of the other person, shame the person into submission, right? No, we're not fighting over one thing that's here, that one of us is going to win the space, win the war, win the battle. We are in a bigger space, okay? We're holding a space that's big enough for both people. There's enough for everyone, okay? There's room for everyone as long as they're staying in their own spaces and not fighting and attacking each other and being violent, okay? As long as that is the case, then there is space for everyone. And that's the template, okay? There's space for this person to completely have their beliefs, thoughts, feelings, perceptions, values, and there's room for this person to have their complete reality, their beliefs, thoughts, perceptions, values. And when we're able to hold space, even if they're completely in opposition, then something different can happen. And something different does happen. Have you ever experienced this in a relationship where there's a flare-up, something really intense, activation on both sides, etc., and then you're able to work it out. You're able to, to repair, to talk it out. And how does that go, right? Well, how it goes is this template, which is that people's, nervous system regulation comes back online. They're able to be in the green zone together. They're able to have their prefrontal cortex online. They're able to hold enough space in themselves for the other person and for the other person's experience. This is a beautiful, in couples therapy work, the Imago dialogue is exactly this. And it's very elegant and brilliant, that that each partner is able to actually hold space and fully give all their attention to understanding the other person's experience, empathy. It's basically practicing empathy. And here's the thing, is that, again, we are all entrained into this cultural conditioning model that has taught us that this other way is the way to get safety. It's the way to take care of my family and my tribe, and this is how I keep myself safe. That's the thing. We have to let that go. All the ways and the strategies of control and domination, might makes right, okay? All the strategies that we do, that the ego defenses do, whether it's withdrawal and gaslighting, or withdrawing from somebody, like you hear that they have it differently, and you just basically just neglect and just go away, like you just like drop the conversation completely, you just ghost them, okay? That's another, that's hurtful. That's passive aggressiveness, is what it is. Okay, so the way that this gets healed is by releasing that old paradigm and stepping into this new platform. How can we stay in the conflict energy without getting afraid and running away, or this person gets afraid and attacks? They're both coming from fear. The person that attacks feels threatened because they're insecure about their own reality. They can't hold their own reality and hold the other person's reality at the same time. And so they attack out of fear. This person runs away out of fear. Okay, so here's the thing. This is the final conclusion, punctuation here, is that if both people have it in them to hold themselves in their own reality, my reality isn't threatened by validating another person's reality, because I know that this is my reality. I'm okay. I'm over here. As long as they're not attacking me, I'm over here. I'm okay. I know myself. I know my own truth. And, I'm open to other possibilities and having a conversation. I'm open to exploration. I'm open to new information. Right? If my reality isn't threatened by a person who has a different reality, then I'm secure enough and I can just hold myself over here and stay in the conversation. And maybe the conversation, goes in such a way that I'm less interested in having that relationship continue in the future. That's okay. That's not what this is about, okay? Because oftentimes authentic communication leads to differences are revealed and, it's not a fit. And that's fine. That's part of the process. But by showing up for conflict in this way, then we can really see. We can see if what there is here. And it opens up an opportunity for something different to happen. So again, if each person feels safe and secure enough in themselves, and they're not needing to cancel each other out in order to feel okay or to win the battle, then they both feel safe and secure. And we can stay in conversation and just acknowledge, just hold the little space. Just one moment, 1 microsecond is all it takes of staying with each other in that conflict. And being willing, this is the transcendent third space, being willing just to acknowledge the conflict and acknowledge that there's a difference and there's a disagreement. Two people do not agree on the same reality or the same conclusion. They don't want the same thing, whatever the conflict is. And that's okay. So as soon as that micro moment, that little window happens in the quantum field, it changes things. It changes the whole chemistry, the whole alchemy of the relational field. Okay? Have you ever experienced that where you're like I said, you've been in an activation with someone, you're able to talk about it and think about how good it feels the moment that you experience the other person, and then you're willing to do it for them as well, but that you experience that the other person is acknowledging your reality and is able to acknowledge that they see it differently. And that together you're able to hold a space for both of you. Together you're able to commune up here in your higher self, in your higher, aspect of your energy. The one that is able to witness the whole situation, the transcendent third. Okay, the transcendent third is like it comes out and makes a circle around both people. And both people are able to be in that transcendent third space, which is like a sphere surrounding both of you. It's an expansive state of consciousness. And that's the key. And do you remember when you've experienced this, how good it feels and how it discharges the conflict energy? So that even though you both still have your true positions that are opposing each other, perhaps, all of a sudden it's less of a problem. All of a sudden, and then here's where the magic is and the alchemy of this, all of a sudden something else happens. There's some solution energy. There's something that comes from the transcendent third position that is a new idea because it's coming from a higher state of consciousness. It's coming from this transcendent third space, which is beyond the duality of the two positions. And it discharges the conflict, and actually something new is born in the field, right? Just like in dealing with the inner conflict of the inner self, the same principle, the same magic happens in the field with the other person. And, like I said, I mean, just acknowledge, all it takes is, first of all, having the position in each person to be willing to accept that the other person has a different opposing reality, and that you're not going to fight them on it. You're not going to attack them. You're not going to abandon them. You're not going to just shut down and go away and disconnect. You're going to stay, and you're going to speak your truth authentically, which is a gift that we give each other. And you're going to see what happens, okay? What might happen is you acknowledge, what, we see this differently, don't we? And like I said, from there, maybe there isn't a fit, or maybe there isn't an interest or an alignment in going forward with a relationship. Maybe something also, completely new emerges in that space that is like an opening of some sort, okay? But the point is that all it takes, even if the relationship separates, that there's a separation because of the conflict, if there is this experience of acknowledging each other in the difference, in acknowledging each person's reality without attacking them or abandoning them, then there's something beautiful that has already happened there. Just in that acknowledgement, there's authenticity, there's vulnerability, there's truth, right? Ironically, there's truth. At least we can agree on this truth, that we see this differently, don't we? That is communication. That is unity energy. Okay? And that is the key that is going to save us as humanity. That is what's necessary in order for us to shift out of this violent culture that we are perpetuating with each other through our relationships. This is the key to saving humanity, for healing ourselves as a culture, as a people. Okay? And so this is the only way that it works, is by practicing this template. Whatever the differences are, whatever the beliefs differences are, As long as we're not, again, this is so key, I know I keep repeating it, as long as we're not trying to attack the other person and shame them into seeing how they're wrong, or abandoning them, or shutting down, whatever the thing is that just creates disconnection and more violence. As long as that isn't happening, as long as we're respecting each other enough to allow each other to exist in our truth, we create a platform for this harmony in life, for this what is it? Unity with equality. Unity with equality. It's unity. It's the rainbow. It's the rainbow warrior tribe that the Hopis talked about. It's the unity. It's the biodiversity of life on this planet, including all the humans together in harmony, and that we can live with differences. And we can celebrate that, and we can also, really disagree. We have to get past this warring mentality of right and wrong. And then from there, that's where I'm saying that the magic and the stuff that's beyond what we can even see right now can then happen. That this is just the first stage, right? But we have to stop battling each other for whose reality is right and wrong, and stay in the space to acknowledge, wow, we really see this differently. Like, well, okay, what's going to happen now? But the wholeness that's created, right? The wholeness that I get to experience when someone is willing to stay in that space with me, there's something healing for both people about that, even if you decide to go different ways. This is really the key. So I hope this makes sense, and it is a tall order. I totally understand that, and I'm just at the edge of my own, challenging myself in these ways to speak my truth, even when it's in conflict, and that I'm not doing it from a place of trying to top the other person or win an argument. I'm doing it in allegiance to myself as a participant amongst many. But it doesn't do anyone a service for me to just shut down and stay shut down and just believe that it's not safe for me to speak my truth. I mean, that's my personal positioning in this landscape. And so, it's a gift for me to speak my truth, and when it's in conflict with a truth that someone else is speaking to me, it's a gift to myself and to all life to stay over here and show up in my truth and be open to a conversation to happen. I'm not speaking my truth to overtake another person. That's the old paradigm. I'm speaking my truth to stay in conversation, to stay in participation with life. And that's where we really start to, flower open in the garden of all of this. And there's so much more possible that we can create as a society. All our energy is going into conflict, essentially, at some level. So I'm going to leave it here for now. I know I've gone on for a long time. I hope you find this helpful. And I wish you strength and clarity and power in your practice of this, both in terms of your own internal conflicts and conflicts that arise with another person. So thank you for listening if you're still here, and I wish you well. Bye for now.